All right, everyone, welcome back to the show. And for those new listeners, welcome. We're really excited to have you here. So today we are talking to someone that I believe has got so much to share with us on really setting yourself on a path that you choose, not waiting in line, not waiting for permission, but someone who's really decided to take their own space and develop a brand both personally, creatively, and professionally that's making a big difference. So with that, welcome to the show, Crystal.
Hi. Thanks for
All
having
right.
me.
Oh, our pleasure. I'm really, really psyched. So there's a lot to start with, but I do want to put right up front. Could you tell us really quickly what you do professionally and then also what you do in your spare time from a creative standpoint?
Oh, okay. So actually, professionally right now, this is actually very new. I work for Alaska Airlines right now, and with them, I work in our lounge, but I also work with our Women's Interactive Network group, and I am the community outreach chair for them. And I also work with our Latin Culture Resource Group, and I am the co-chair for them. So that's my professional side. And then my creative side is that I do vocals for the band Initiate.
Okay. So for those of you from the punk and hardcore scene listening, Initiate. They're sick. For those of you who don't, go check them out. So if you are a fan of heavy music and if you are a fan of like really sick breakdowns, you will like Initiate. They're really, really good. For those of you who might not like that, but want to check out just a killer band, check out Initiate. They've got a record out on Triple B called Lavender. And then what else from Initiate is out there?
So we have our first LP Before Long. That, oh wow, I'm not even sure of the year that came out. I want to say maybe 2017, 2018. And then we have our demo on Bandcamp.
Okay,
So we only have two.
That's a lot. That
Yeah.
is a lot. All right, so let's get into it. One of the reasons we wanted to have you on the show was a real focus that you have in your life in general, but also moving towards this professionally with anti-racist leadership.
Yes.
So we have seen, of course, and I'm not trying to at all sound a little cynical, but sometimes I feel a little cynical of all of these organizations that are doing huge marketing campaigns around inclusivity and diversity and all of these things. But there's always this sense of like, are you just saying that now because it's like the thing to say? Or are you really putting your money where your mouth is? Are you really creating that change? So from your perspective, are things really changing, or is this just one giant marketing campaign?
Well, let's see. So as far as companies go, I will say this. I think I'm very fortunate to be in a position where I'm working for Alaska Airlines specifically, because I do feel like that is a company that's putting their money where their mouth is. I do know that there was a huge increase in our diversity and inclusion budget over the last year. And I also felt like it was very bold of them to make a statement that they stood with the Black Lives Matter movement. And that was very early on too. Whereas like I, a lot of companies did do that. They did say like, hey, we stand for the Black Lives Matter movement. But I think Alaska did take it a step further. And I think a lot of that had to contribute with our, was working and collaborating with one of our business resource groups. And they're the Air Group Black Employees, Allies, and Advocates. And so that group really utilized the timing and the sense of urgency that was needed with Alaska Airlines as a company to really say like, hey, like not only do we need you guys to just say that you stand for this, but you need to make your employees feel comfortable being able to have this conversation in the workplace, as well as having our guests traveling with us be comfortable traveling our airline and know that, like we have their back in case anything happens. So on that end, I do feel like I can speak to Alaska Airlines specifically, it's like there are companies here and there where it is a little frustrating seeing them come out with these statements and then you hear their employees being like, oh, well, not really.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's telling about the way that they, amplify their employees' voices or not. Some companies will just try to squash their employees down and delete those comments and just have that not come out. But Alaska has really tried to amplify those voices and to really kind of see where opportunities of growth are. So yeah, I do see where the frustration lies, and I do get frustrated myself seeing some of these companies. But on the other more positive end of things, like right before my eyes, I am seeing a company that is, I think, doing it right, that is really, really trying to like work with their employees and work with the current events and just like going for it and trying to do the best that they can.
Yeah, and you're raising a good point. You know, I do find myself mired a little bit in cynicism around this, and I love to hear what you're saying, because it is a good gut check for me that, you know, change does take time and that there are organizations who really are doing it. So I love to hear that. If we're going to reflect on you, what got you into the fight? Was it ever a choice for you, or were you just like, no, like I am going to be involved in creating a more equitable society. I'm going to be involved in helping create anti-racist leadership. So for you, was it a choice to get involved, or was it just something that you've always just had been a part of your life?
This is so funny. I actually feel like I reflect on this every now and then, because especially with entering punk and hardcore in general, I'm just like, how did I get here? You know, like you like, because like, I mean, my upbringing was like I wasn't allowed to listen to hardcore music as a kid. You know, I had to listen to that secretly. And so when you think of like at least when I reflect on like, whoa, like not only am I like listening to punk and hardcore music and involved with that now, but like, you know, like my dear friend Alec, who's also the guitarist of Initiate, like really pushed me to be like, no, you should be the vocalist of this band. Like, you know, it's kind of funny, but I think that has always kind of been there. That drive has always kind of been there. Like, so I grew up in an Asian and Spanish family, or like household. My mom is Chilean and my dad is Korean. So I'm a first generation in the United States, born and raised here. And so growing up with those cultural traditions, there is, you know, like some, you know, like at least within Asian culture, my experience, there is a little bit of, I'm not even going to underplay it. There is misogyny within the Asian culture, where it be like, you know, like the first son is favored, and they're just like really deep, you know, like cultural traditions that just kind of still have lived on. And, you know, and there's, you know, like I do see some good and bad in like carrying on tradition like that culturally. But I had always been the type that was like, oh, well, why can't I do that? You know, and I'd always question that, you know, like I remember one year my brother got to go on the roof and hang up the Christmas lights. And I was like, well, why does he get to do that? I want to do that. And I was told like, no, you have to go help your mom in the kitchen. And so it was just like, but I want to get on the roof, you know, like that looks fun. And so I think that as like when I was very young is when I started thinking like, okay, like why can't I do that? You know, or like, you know, as I got older, it was like, oh, well, why don't those kids have access to education and I do, you know? And my brother's also deaf. So it was like, why didn't my brother have access to learning formal sign language until high school?
Wow.
You know, like, so I think that the fight for just overall equity in general started when I was very young. And that's not anything that you realize as a kid. You just kind of start questioning it. And so then, yeah, when I was younger, I would, you know, I joined clubs when Invisible Children was like a huge thing. I like had created like a little group at my high school, and I like had them come and like do a presentation and stuff like that, you know, like,
Yeah.
and I had a teacher ask me like, why are you doing this? And he actually wrote this on a little piece of wood that he gave to me. I still have it somewhere in my room. And this was like over 10 years ago now. But I said, you know, well, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? Who's going to do the work? And so, yeah, I think the fight started when I was super, super young. But it kind of solidified that was I saw as my truth once I got to college. seeing that there was actual professional work that I could do, and actually make a career out of something that I thought I was doing as a hobby with like all of these clubs and, just like asking all of these questions, because I grew up thinking like, yeah, I want to be a pediatrician, and having it instilled that like, you should be a doctor, you should be a lawyer. But then, yeah, really coming to and being like, whoa, I can actually like, like make it a job to like really speak out for people who don't have equitable education. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah,
And they don't tell you a lot of these opportunities in high school. Like, it's mainly like, oh, well, you have A, B, C, or D careers to choose from. But yeah, when I was in college, that really solidified like, this is what I want to do. And I don't know how I'm going to get there, but yeah, that's kind of where that started.
Okay. So it sounds like you found your voice a long time ago, like far before punk and hardcore. You were already moving down this path. Did punk and hardcore play any role in it augmenting that voice or focusing that voice, or was it just another platform for you to speak from?
I think punk and hardcore absolutely helped me shape that voice and also gain confidence in my own voice. And I think a lot of that has to do with the people that I met there, and also just fully admiring just like the ferocity that the women in hardcore had that I saw when I was younger. Especially when it came to like something like when I was younger, like looking in and seeing how like moshing and like crowd killing was just so scary. But then, seeing these women go in and just completely kick ass was like, whoa, that is so cool. And also just seeing how outspoken and how unrelentingly individual these people were, like, and unapologetic about who they were. And that really, really helped shape that strong foundation that I think I have today of like, I don't have to follow these norms to get to where I want to be, and also my educational experience wasn't necessarily traditional. I didn't go from high school into a 4-year university. I went from high school to community college against my parents' wishes because they wanted me to go to the 4-year. Took a break, and then went back to community college, and then I transferred. And I wouldn't say that's necessarily the norm. That took me almost 6 to 7 years of just figuring out what I wanted to do in community college. But I was also always confident in that, but it was always because I had learned from punk and hardcore, like, I do not have to follow the rules of normalcy to get to where I want to be. So I do think that helped shape a lot of the current confidence I have in my decisions today.
I love that so much. So tell us about your education. So what did you end up graduating and finishing school with?
So I went into school wanting to be a biochem major, which is so crazy to me now. But just and I did thoroughly try because I loved science. But when I got to college, it was just like, this is just not for me. I am not that, like, I'm competitive, but I don't have the discipline to sit down and study a periodic table for 9 hours,
Yeah.
And it was actually my sociology teacher when I was a freshman who looked me in the eyes and was like, oh, can I cuss on here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All you want, as much as you want. Overtime.
All right. So I was 18 years old, and I have this professor look me in the eyes and tell me, I'm gonna fuck with your universe. And from then on, she really did. Like, I feel like everyone should be taking a sociology 101 class. Like, that was so eye-opening for me. And it was through talking to her that I realized, oh my God, like, I can be a sociologist. Like, that is a career choice that I can choose. So then it took a little bit of time before I had finally said, like, you know what, I'm gonna pursue sociology. And then from there, I took a break from school while I was trying to figure that out, when I said science is not for me. And then when I took about 1.5 years off. And from that time, I had moved from San Diego to Santa Barbara. because I had a few friends say, you should get into sociology. UCSB has a great sociology program. So I went to Santa Barbara City College and joined their TAG program, which is like a transfer admission guarantee, where they kind of set you up to make sure that you have resources and you can like get your grades up. You have like all of this help, because I wasn't really doing well academically in the science field anyway. So it was like I had a lot of classes I needed to retake. And then ended up going to UCSB and then graduating last June with sociology and a bachelor's in sociology and a minor in education.
Nice. So are there any next steps planned, or are you just going to work for a while and see how it goes?
Hoping by the end of this year that I can go to grad school for educational policy. I was looking at UCLA's programs and also talking to my brother because he's also heavily involved in educational policy and stuff, but he is more geared toward the deaf community. But he has like a lot of friends that are in educational policy, so I've kind of been talking to them more. So the goal is UCLA, but Cal State Northridge also has a really good grad program. So we'll see. I've also been kind of looking at Columbia University, so I don't really know yet.
Very cool. Okay, so let's bring it back to anti-racist leadership.
Yeah.
And as you've gone through this process, you had your voice when you were already in high school and you're already thinking along those lines. You find punk and hardcore, it helps shape that. You go to university. So now you're in the professional world and you're seeing a lot of things that you feel you can make an impact and you can make a change. But beyond just say like the individuals like you or me or people we know, what do you think organizations and businesses can do to hear and act upon marginalized and unheard voices? Like what are the tangible things organizations can do?
I think it starts with not only empowering your employees to speak out, but also encouraging your employees to group. I feel like that's a big scary thing for companies to want for their employees to like group up together and like try to change things up and shake things up. But I honestly think that if organizations and companies are open to that and collaborating and working, that you can get so much done. And I'm such a fangirl for Alaska Airlines, but like, like going back to them, like they have so many business resource groups. They have, the Air Group Black Employees Advocates and Allies. They have Air Group Pan Asian. They have a military resource group, an LGBTQ plus resource group, Native Employees resource group, Women in Tech, and like all of those are just different resource groups that not only creates the sense of community for each other, to be able to come together and speak about what's on your mind in like a safe place without consequence, and then using those grievances and being like, well, how can we change this? Like, how can we support this? And there's so much proven studies that show that community organizing does achieve success within, like different places. And so, and I think that that's so important. I think that's huge if companies would just, broaden that a little more, to be able to just get that, like just open that door to constructive criticism and then working together.
Yeah. And by the way, I love seeing someone who's a fan of where they work. Because, in my work, I see a lot of people who are feel bad about where they work. They feel terrible about their boss. They feel like they're in bad situations. So it's really refreshing for me. You're the second person I talked to today on the podcast who like loves where they work. So it makes me feel really good. I love to hear these, especially because it sounds like you have such a good reason that you feel that your organization actually really cares about the things that you care about. That there's like an ethical alignment.
Yeah. And I've never actually felt any sort of sense of pride for where I've worked before. And I've worked in a lot of like customer service spaces. But no, Alaska Airlines is absolutely the first time where I've been like, yeah, like I love working here. And the ethical alignment is a huge reason why too. Also just their quickness with addressing things, like our Air Group Pan Asian group after the shootings in Atlanta, the next morning sent out an email to everyone and was like, hey, we're going to have a conversation later today. If you just want to talk about it, just, like just as a space, a collective space for our affected employees to just come together and talk. And I think that builds community, that builds that like sense of care, and from there we can start, when you have that confidence in being able to speak to your fellow employees in different work groups too. It's not just frontline employees, we have corporate in these meetings as well as our frontline employees, our operations, and having everyone come together to build that. So when you take it from there and you have that, you build that trust and confidence with your employees, I do think that you can actually start being more comfortable as an employee to start sharing like, hey, I'm having these really weird experiences. Can I talk to you about them? And then from there, you start realizing like, oh shoot, like, like for like, we have a manager that's kind of being weird and only treating some employees a certain way and some not, like, but you don't know until you start building that trust with your employees. And then collecting the data from there. But so much of it goes just like unnoticed and untalked about.
Well, you've talked a lot about like trust, and really like the outcrop of that is like relationship building. And when we're thinking about moving into really improving and growing an organization's ability to have not just leadership, but like anti-racist leadership, it sounds like having real relationships and real trust is a part of it. But there's also like a ton of fear out there as we're making these really important social and professional changes. So do you have any thoughts on how organizations and leaders can like really hold their space and move more and more in this direction of creating this like wave of anti-racism within an organization, while also not pushing people out, but bringing them along? So people who might be afraid or resistant, not because they themselves are racist, because they're just scared. Any thoughts on how we can do that?
Yeah, I think it does start with anti-racist education. And a lot of my passion for that is actually in K through 12 classrooms, but being that I'm not there right now, it was more of like, well, how can I start to question anti-racist education in our training? And that goes with, and we have recurrent annual trainings, of like, hey, like how to be a cool person,
we need to do a 101 of that, like in the world.
And it's also having the space to do it, having people who are fearful of that and bringing them in. I think it also actually my manager, her name is Sarah. She her and I had a discussion very recently about how she wanted to be that person that people could come to and make herself available to have these discussions about racial inequity and different sort of hot topics that you would otherwise be uncomfortable about. And I think that's so powerful for a leader to be able to email her staff and say, hey, I can see that this is going on. Our department director emailed us with a few updates, but she also included like, I know that the George Floyd trial is going on right now. So if you do want to talk about that, I am open to it. I think really putting yourself out there and having leadership say, you can come to me on whatever side you're on about this, and we can talk about, about this inside, outside of work. It doesn't matter. You're not going to get penalized for this by any means. Having leadership be open to that, I think, is huge for an organization to be able to have. And I'm sorry, what was the second part?
Well, I was you really answered it. It was that, how do we bring people along? So what I'm hearing here is like, so for a leader to be like that, to have that level of like vulnerability and openness, that takes a lot of moral fiber and ethical fiber and courage too, because like these are big, scary conversations, and like you can take missteps, you could do the wrong thing. it takes a huge amount of guts for people being willing to be in that space. So it sounds like also like making good hires, like people who've got the guts and the courage to really like, it's okay to screw up as long as you can take accountability for it. Because this, like the leader that you're talking about, sounds like someone who's got like real courage to be in that space.
Yeah, definitely. And then when you have people like that in your organization, you know, I feel like that definitely trickles down to the employees who will, if they're interested in moving up, will hopefully carry that with them, that openness and vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And also, as I said earlier, we have, you know, different trainings when we bring in new hires or recurrent trainings that people have to do. But I think also as a company, really stating, you know, like, we are open to this. In Alaska Airlines, there's a specific page for diversity and inclusion, and that page clearly states, hey, these are the people in each department that you can go talk to, and it links them right to their email. If you have any questions about anything, or you have any concerns about anything, like, reach out to these people can get in contact with you. And yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm a fangirl for Alaska. I feel like Alaska's doing it right. We still have a lot of opportunity for growth for sure. But I do think that having, you know, building that sense of community is very hard, like, to genuinely do within a company. Companies always say like, oh, I'm family, and you're, but like the reality most of the time is that you're expendable.
Totally.
But I really don't feel like this is the case for this company. They are building groups that, you know, different affinity groups for people, to be able to come together. And then they're also, yeah, like you said, like, hiring courageous leaders that put themselves and, you know, like, also their emotional selves on the line to be able to have these conversations.
Yeah, 100%. And kind of an interesting way, I know this is like kind of a redundant thing, but like, you know, in punk and hardcore, you get up there and you're just raw. You're just telling your story. You're doing your stuff. And it's like punk and hardcore is supposed to be this like, yeah, this is like, I'm really expressing who I am. Mm-hmm. It's almost in a way like bringing a little like punk and hardcore into your leadership, the hiring, like bring people in who are willing to be in the fray, willing to be in the conversation, willing to be wrong and to learn and have accountability. So it sounds like your organization's doing really good work, and you're saying they can still do more, but like they're doing it in the right way. And let me ask you a follow-up question though. Mm-hmm. So I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I'm real interested in yours. How can companies better focus their resources on social programs? Because like companies right now, I think, are just like, holy crap, we need to do something. And so they're just pushing out money. But like, how can they do it better? What are some of the ways they can bring a sharper and more intentional focus to what they're doing?
This is so interesting because I've been racking my brain about the same thing, especially as community outreach chair. Mm-hmm. That's, you know, like, that is essentially my duty, to be able to utilize our resources and put them out there. But I actually recently found out, the more that I learn about this company, is that our old CEO, Brad Tilden, he actually just retired yesterday. So his huge thing with the company was making sure that, as far as community outreach goes, we understand how academic achievement works, starting from K through 12. And so he and a few other people, you know, like, they started designing different events. So like, we have a day where we invite the schools to come, at least pre-COVID, was we invite the schools to come on a field trip to Boeing or to Alaska Airlines and talk about the different ways that these kids can be pilots, that they can be flight attendants, that they can work here. And also donating money to these schools to make sure that they go to children who, to almost close that academic achievement gap, at least within Seattle. I don't know how far that goes. I don't know if Alaska's donating to cities outside of Seattle. I'm still, as I said, I was still learning. But at least I know for Seattle specifically, our organization is donating and also recognizes that when children don't have access to different resources in school, that they then, you know, like, then they don't graduate high school. and then they don't end up getting a college degree, and that affects our hiring.
Mm.
So then we can't hire these people with all of these different experiences just because they didn't have, they fell short on a few resources to be able to graduate high school.
Mm.
And so our organization recognizes that, and I think that that's really cool. Like knowing that it starts with our youth rather than it starts with, it does start with the adults that we hire too, but you can go even further than that and start recognizing like, hey, if your surrounding community, like your future workforce, like can be affected because they're just not graduating high school. You can get a kid who is a great community organizer at the age of 15 years old. We actually have an organization called Eastside Change Collective, and they're great. They are currently working on trying to get security guards out of their high schools. So you get kids like that who have amazing leadership experience at a young age, but then maybe they couldn't come to school because they just didn't have a ride to school, and that leads you to being truant, and then truancy can prevent you from graduating rather than trying to fix the issue of truancy, which is a whole nother thing with school programs in general. But, and knowing and recognizing that starts with our youth, and how that can down the line affect our hiring pool, because that also then makes our hiring pool not as diverse as we would like it to be.
That's
because you don't have the kids.
That's a wild approach. Like, it's not even like, that is not even on the map of something I would be thinking about, because I'm only thinking within organization what you could do. So that idea of actually like investing within the community, especially in youth and youth education, and like essentially saying like, we're investing in the community, and by doing that, we're actually investing in our organization 10 years from now, because we're helping create like a whole new generation of people who have equal access to education and opportunity. That's like, that's really, really awesome. I hadn't even thought of that at all. That's super cool. But now here's my follow-up question, and I've got a story I'm going to tell after that.
All right.
Have you seen any missteps in how companies are engaging with this kind of work?
I think the missteps is just donating the money and then just never looking back. I think that's huge. Like, yeah, you can put your money where your mouth is, but are you walking the walk as much as you're talking the talk? And I think that's almost a cop-out. That is a cop-out. It's not almost a cop-out. It is a cop-out. It's not having someone designated to ensure, A, that money's going to the right places, or those resources are going to the right places, and then B, like really just not giving a care after that. There's no actual, and like the intention isn't genuine. It's just the intention is just to make the company look good. It's not to actually create the change that you are saying that you want to change. Yeah,
totally. This is it. Totally. And like, so do you mind if I share a story?
Oh, I don't mind at all.
This is what's made me a little cynical about this. And I am actually trying to shake off my cynicism about it, because like, I do believe that people want the right things to happen. I do believe that. And I do believe that there are better ways to do business, and that individuals and teams and organizations are making a difference. But this is where some of my cynicism is rooted. So I work with a lot of like senior level teams, and I work with a lot of CEOs and C-suites, and I see and hear all sorts of things, mostly like really cool and really positive. And there are a lot of stories I can share, and there are of course a ton of stories I can't share because of confidentiality. One time I was in a meeting with a CEO and his team, and I'll never ever forget this. It was all white men except for one woman in leadership in the group. And everyone did their business update for their part of the business, and they were all just like standard business updates. And this female leader got up and gave this business update and had a section in there about diversity and inclusion, and had talked about the work that her and her team had been doing within their part of the business. And not only did they talk about how the work that they were doing to increase the diversity and inclusion and to engage and bring in like different voices and different ideas, she was actually able to boil this down into metrics and talk about like, and this is actually how this has helped our bottom line, and how it's actually increased our ability to build business and grow our profits. So it's this really well done. The presentation looked good. It was eloquently spoken. It was like just really powerful. And I looked around the room, and all the leaders were on their phones or on their iPads. And then afterwards, the leader was like, oh, yeah, hey, thanks a lot for that. And I was mortified. And so afterwards, I was talking to the leader and I just said, do you want me to help you and your team get better? And he was like, yes, I do. And I said, I got to hold up the mirror to you. Like, this is what I just saw in this room. And he said, oh, listen, this equity and diversity stuff, he's like, this kumbaya stuff, all of that. I know we got to put money into it, but honestly, it's just for me, it's just some money that we put into. I don't really care about it. And I was just like flabbergasted that this person had said this to me. And like my jaw was on the floor, like, holy crap. And the more I pushed, the more dismissive they were. And I was really like horrified. Clearly, I stopped working with them very shortly afterwards because I was just absolutely appalled by it. But fast forward to a year and a half ago when there's very serious challenges within our society due to very serious violence towards Black communities and a real pushback of North American society. Exact same leader puts up the you can already read the post of we stand with the community and da da da. And I remember looking at this thing and thinking, this is how I feel about all this stuff. Is this person literally said to me a year and a half ago, they do not care about this, and then are putting up this impassioned thing because they have to. And it's that because they have to, because we got to do this for the company. So when I think about anti-racist leadership, I always go back to that thought of how much of this is because you have to versus how much of it is because you must, because you believe in it. You have to because you're afraid of the consequences of not doing it versus you must because you so deeply believe in it. There's no other choice that you have.
That's wow.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is why I was really looking forward to our conversation because I know you're serious about this. And I know there are hundreds and thousands and millions of people that are serious about this. But that still exists. The people who can make those kinds of decisions about how things get funded, where money goes, they still exist. So how do we go about applying consistent pressure and making sure things change? And I know I'm asking a huge question, so any thoughts you have there?
Yeah, that's that's a lot of thoughts right there. I really think it comes down to grassroots mobilization. Mm-hmm. It just really boils down to that. I feel like sometimes if you have to hold your leadership accountable, and that starts from the bottom up. And it's always been a hard battle. It's never easy. It always takes so much time because there's just so much policy and rules that you have to go through to get there, and then sometimes you just hit a wall. But then I also think that that's kind of cool where social media plays into the whole realm of activism, because you get to see these employees speak out and say, hey, we tried and this person still sucks. Yeah. And that is, I think, where it kind of social media kind of gets utilized to the advantage. If your employees can't apply enough pressure for you to genuinely feel it, then you're going to feel it somewhere else. Mm-hmm. But that also takes, people coming together, building that community support, because it's a tiring journey especially if, for example, if you're going up against a CEO, like you just mentioned, who just genuinely doesn't care, won't budge, then yeah, I can see that being a hard journey for everyone involved. But I do think that if organizations, it starts with the employees for sure.
Yeah. And what you said, it's hey, from the top to the bottom or from the bottom up. But a lot of this stuff is, I think there's a lot of people from the front lines that are super willing. They're I'll sacrifice, I'll make the changes. It's the people at the top who have a lot more to lose, and they have a lot more power and influence, and they don't want to give that up. They don't want to see the world change, that we got to apply that pressure. So you manage the role that technology can play in that, and applying that pressure and that kind of grassroots organizing. What can you tell us about digital disparity?
Oh, digital disparity. So digital disparity, in a nutshell, it's kind of the gap I mean, it's mainly applied in terms of schools, and that is mainly used to describe the gap between students who do have access to internet and resources, like technological resources, and then those who don't. It's kind of also known as the digital divide as well, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, the more that I start living in this pandemic world, the more you can start thinking about the ways that digital disparity applies with adults in the workplace too. It also goes with the argument of like, oh, well, that person doesn't need a phone. They, you know, like it's with the whole stimulus conversation of like, oh, well, that person doesn't need a nice phone. Why don't they just get a new one and then pay off their bills with their stimulus type of thing, you know? That also starts going into the topic of digital disparity as well. And oftentimes, you know, those who are most affected by the lack of technology are minority groups. So
yeah, because when you brought up the idea of like, you know, grassroots organizing and the pressure that can be applied, and also the information sharing that could be applied through technology, when we think of that idea of digital disparity, it seems like that's like a clear gap where people whose voices need to be lifted or people who need access to information might not get it because of this.
Exactly.
So what can organizations do to help around that, to either like help close that gap or to be making sure that people at least get access to information, their voices get raised?
So as far as organizations, are we speaking more on the like the company side of things or the school side of things? Because there's
Either
I think
or.
there's like a okay. Well, I mean, when I was working, so actually when I came out to Seattle, I started working with the NAACP, with their education committee, and one of our focuses was identifying digital disparity. And so within that, I started thinking like, oh, well, Alaska Airlines has a women in tech resource group. Why don't I reach out to them and see if they can help with the fact that students have to wait 2 weeks to get their computers fixed right now within Seattle Public Schools? And, or, you know, like they're having computer issues, their internet is out. And I do know that Seattle did provide some sort of like internet access relief for households, but the wait to use your computer was still up to 2 weeks because if your computer had any problems, it was just so backlogged with other students who needed, you know, the thousands of students within the Seattle Public Schools district. So I guess that kind of meshes both. The way organizations can help remedy digital disparity is, one, if your organization has the resources to help the community, use them, you know. I didn't actually think until I started working more with the business research groups at Alaska, I was like, whoa, like we literally have a bunch of women who are just like, you know, tech nerds, and it's so cool. Like maybe they can help out. But also schools ensuring that their students do have access, and also making sure that that wait time isn't 2 weeks. Or like with everyone operating in like a digital world right now more than we ever really have, making sure that if you are doing remote work, maybe supplying your employees with remote access, you know, or if a lot of their stuff is like by their phones. Like right now, I don't have a working computer very well, and I'm always on my boyfriend's computer because he works during the day. So like a lot of my work is on his computer. So like, and I mean like I'm think like our situation worked out where he's like, I also have a computer at work as well, not my own, but it's like the work computers. But you know, like that is like a small little blip in my life of like how like I don't have a working computer, and like a lot of my work I do on my phone, or like I'm answering emails on my phone. Because, you know, like it's just my work doesn't necessarily need a computer, but I do kind of need a computer, you know?
Yeah.
Or like I said earlier with like the phone and the stimulus thing, like people thinking that like a phone is just an expendable item. You don't need a fancy phone. But like, how are you supposed to respond to emails, answer phone calls for interviews, like get from point A to point B? Because like, I don't know the last time I saw a paper map anywhere, you know, like if I'm taking the bus and I need to go from point A to point B, like I might get lost if I've never done that before. So it's really trying to pinpoint all of the different steps where you need technology. And I think it also takes someone to recognize, like, a phone is just as important as a computer. You cannot just buy a flip phone and expect someone to just be good with that. Like, have you tried typing out an email on a flip phone? Like,
no. I don't want to. I don't want that in my life. All right, I got 3 more questions for you as we're closing off. Okay, the first is, what's your message for people who are still on the sidelines? So people who, they want to see change, but they're afraid to get involved, or they think it's not their fight, or maybe they're worried that they're going to make a mistake. So what's a message that you have for anyone who's still on the sidelines as we're moving towards more of an anti-racist leadership style?
I think it's just allowing yourself to be vulnerable. I think that's the biggest thing, and having your defenses down, because I think a huge step in also being an anti-racist advocate is it's constant. It's an active work in progress, and even for myself as well, identifying, things that you grew up with, and then trying to unlearn them it's active. But if you don't allow yourself to be open to that, to be open to criticism, and open to being, to listening and to expressing your thoughts without fear. Like, because there are some, some thoughts that people could have that it's just like, that's just the way that they grew up. That is that level of thinking. And, if you are the person listening, to have compassion for that, if that's all that person knows is, like, for example, if someone grew up and all they grew up with was white supremacy, but they're starting to realize maybe that's not the way. Like, you have to have a level of compassion for the person trying to unlearn that. And especially if that person is on the fence, like, that's a major, like, step in bringing someone from one side of the fence to the other. Having compassion and also being vulnerable is 2 major components.
I love to hear that. Okay, second, this is not on topic, but it's super important to our conversation. 3 Southern California go-to bands, hardcore bands for you, from any time frame.
Southern California?
Southern California.
Oh, man. Okay, so I'm trying to think. I mean, I feel like Inside Out is just like a staple.
Oh, yeah. You came out with the heat right off the bat.
There you go. Okay. Them, Terror, who has just been there literally my whole life.
Oh, yeah.
And Rotting Out, who was actually, I think Walter's birthday was yesterday. I was just like, he was so, like, instrumental in my comfort within the Southern California hardcore scene. And so, Rotting Out is just like the Southern California hardcore band. And I think that they will stand the test of time.
Excellent. Right on. All right. So final question is, anything you want to leave our audience with as we're wrapping up?
Oh, I feel like I always forget that this is a question I will always be asked in any scenario. And I always forget, and I never come prepared. I think the main thing is there's just so much going on, and I think it's so important to take the time to be gentle with yourself. Whether it be, like, you look in the mirror one day and then you're just like, dang, I look rough today. Just be nice to yourself, Or, like, maybe you didn't get that promotion, but other doors will open. It's just constantly remind yourself to be kind to yourself, because it's so easy to just get stuck in that mindset of just, like, constantly beating yourself up about different things. Like, maybe you're not doing enough, or maybe you feel you're not doing enough as an ally. Maybe you feel that you're doing too much. Just be gentle with yourself. There's just too much going on to, like, not have a moment of mindfulness about that.
I love that so much. Well, Crystal, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
It was super fun. All right. So everyone, I'm going to see you in the outro. And until then, Dave, drop the beat. Wow, there's so much I could say about that interview. There were a lot of times where I got a little emotional because, I mentioned earlier in the conversation where I can feel a bit cynical about this. And I guess I can feel cynical because sometimes it feels like the people in power, they do a real good song and dance about change, but they just switch up the script and keep doing what they were always doing. It takes a conversation with someone like Crystal to remind me that actually things are changing. And sometimes they change by small steps, and sometimes they change by big, big leaps. But what's required is that we do get off the sidelines. Getting off the sidelines can be so scary. I really love the feedback that she gave us, though, like have compassion for other people, like be persistent with what you're doing, but also be gentle with yourself. If we can do that, if we can commit to being like that with ourselves, but also commit to being like that with others and encouraging that in others, I really feel that we're going to make a big change. So with that, thanks once again to Crystal for being on the show, and I hope all of you got as much out of it as I did. As we're closing off, I just want to remind everyone that we're produced by Patrick McKechnie, edited by Dave Larson, and our design is done by Tammy Levy. And with that, we'll see you on the next episode of One Step Beyond.
One